Okay, guys, today we're going to be looking into configuring always on availability group with SQL Server. I'm just going to kind of take it um, slowly and right from ground zero, as I can call it. I have two servers. You can see here, this is a SQL prod, and here is a SQL dev. Um, so these are the two servers I have here, and I will be using these two servers to set up replication between them. Basically, they're always on. So first things first, let me see. Uh, so one of the first things I will be doing here first will be when we're setting up always on, first we will need to make sure that we have the .NET framework enabled, installed, and also we have the failover clustering also installed. So we're going to do that. But before we do that, let me see. It looks like these servers have the same name. Let me see. Sometimes, okay, the computer's device name is the same. Let me see the other one. Yeah, this is just VMware's on the same VM. They have the same name, but no, they have different network, different IP. So maybe on CMD. So if I do IP config, oh, why is it taking that long? That should run. Let me check on the other server. Uh, seem to kind of having server slowing down here. I don't know why. IF config. Oh, sorry. IP config. So this one is running on this IP address 192.168.91.150, and this other one, I don't know why it's CMD IP config. So this one is running on 192.168. This is 156. So basically, I'll just change the computer name here. I'm going to put this computer name here at SQL Server. This is dev. I'll just put it as SQL Server dev. It might need me to restart the server, but that's fine. SQL Server dev. Just going to restart it right now. Right, that one is restarting. I'm also going to change this one here. So, oops, okay. So I'm going to rename this one here also SQL Server Prod. Uh, okay. So I just pray this doesn't take too long. Network stuff. So this one is back up. Oops, sorry. It's kind of always okay. While we're waiting for this one to come up, so everything should be working fine right now. Add Control D. There are always a couple of things I always just want to make sure I have on these servers. Um, so with this service up, um, let me see. I know I have Sometimes I just want to double check if the DHCP server dynamically reallocated a different IP, because when it shuts down sometimes and it comes back up, the DHCP server might reallocate a different IP. Just want to double check to make sure the IPs are still the same. Okay, this is the same. And sometimes what I like to do also is to put it on the host file, so that in case you can to give a host name for it. All right. So I open and go here. I go to Windows. I go to System 32, and then I go to Drivers, and I go to etc, and I will go to host. So here I will put those IP address 192.168.91.150, and I'm going to call this server, I'm going to call it Sql Server. I might just put it the same name. Um, I'll just write it Sql Server Production. Then I'll put 192.168.91.156. And then I'm going to call this SQL Server, SQL Server Development. I'll just leave it at SQL Server Develop. Uh, so I'll just leave it like that. And I will need to do the same thing over here so that I can uh, need to always log in as need to log in with as administrator. If not, you won't be able to edit that file. So come here, go to C, go to Windows. I go to System 32. I go to Drivers. Should be up. Past it some. Oh, where's that? Drivers. Okay, etc. And here we go. I can't copy this across. I would have copied the other 192.168.91.150, and then we're going to call this SQL Server Production, and there's going to 192.168.91.156. I'm going to call this SQL Server Develop. I just want to cross check, make sure everything is good. SQL Server Production. Okay. And now you need to save this file. Okay. And there we go back over here. We can save this one as well. Save, and then we close it. That's fine. So at this point, what we need to do is to download. First of all, is to make sure that we have .NET Framework installed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the production server. So what you do is you can go over to add roles here. So I'm going to click on add roles. Then you take next, and you take next. And then you see we named that our server. So computer name it's it's different. Then we take next. Then yeah, just take next here as well. I just want to enable that .NET framework. And over here, let me see. Yeah, that should be fine. That should be fine. And I need to look for failover clustering. It's very important that you enable this guy failover clustering. You add it, and then you take next. You can ask it if it wants to restart. That's fine, because during installation you might need to restart. So you take install. So that might take a little while. We do the same thing over here. You can minimize this. So this is on my development node. So I do the same thing and take next. Take next. I see my server is named. Fine. Take next. Go next. Let's enable that, and failover clustering right here. Um, it's add, and you take next. And if you want to restart during the process, that's fine. You take install. So it might take a while. This one is going on. It might take a while. I'm just gonna uh, uh, pause the recording and start back up again when everything is installed. But I don't think we have any other thing else to do. I just want us to follow gradually. So yeah. Okay, so now we can see that the installation succeeded. You see here installation succeeded. And on the production node, we could see that the installation also succeeded. So we can go ahead and close this window. And now the next thing we want to do here is that we will need to validate the configuration. So to do that, we will need to go over to tools here, and we'll go to configuration. Where's that at? Failover cluster manager. So you go to failover cluster manager because we need to validate a configuration, and if possible we create the configuration. All right, so you click on validate configuration, do that. So you will have this wizard which comes up, and here we will have to add those different servers to validate it. So here it says enter name. So we can enter the name of our server, which is the primary, the first one, which is server production. SQL Server production, we take add. It says we do not have administrative privileges on this server production. That's weird. Let's see. SQL Server prod. Let me see. Okay, let's add that on the SQL Server prod, and then we add the SQL. Should be SQL Server. I think should be dev. Yeah, SQL Server dev. So we have that, and we can run validate. Let's just go ahead and run validate and to validate these clusters. So it's going to run a couple of checks to check all everything and everything from networking to storage to everything. So let's go click on next. So it runs that check. Um, some of the checks might give a warning, but if it actually gives an error, that is worse. But if it's a warning, depends on what check that might be. You might you might neglect that for now since we're doing a testing. So let's just give it a couple of seconds here for this test to validate and finish. Um, okay. So over here on the development server, we can just close this guy. That's fine. Since we are running the test there, that's okay. Okay, so let's hop back over here. So we could see here that the test completed with some issues. So we could see validated, we see succeed, 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 and we see a couple of things. So if you want to view the report, you can actually click on view report, which will bring up the report over here on an HTML format. And you can kind of see some of the issues like you see here warning, like for network. So if we click on this warning here, we see that node is reachable from this by one pair of network interface. So basically we have just one NIC. So it's kind of just giving you an issue there that, oh, you know, for high availability purposes, you might need to have to. So that's just a warning. So we can just neglect that. That's fine. You might want to create a cluster right now. It's good, yeah, but let's just launch the wizard for that cluster. Let's just click on finish. You want to create a cluster, you come under here to create cluster. Okay, so you come here to create a cluster. You will need to, you just click on next, and you can add the server name. So we can put in our server name here, SQL Server production. I think you should be able to add all this server administrative privilege. Oh, let me use SQL. Let me use the actual computer name. SQL Server prod. Add that node, and it's gonna be SQL Server def. Gonna add that node there. SQL Server def. You can take yes, and then you can give a name for that. I'm here. I'm just gonna give you can give a cluster name, whatever name you want to give. Here, I'm just gonna put uh, availability cluster. I'm just gonna put it as ABG Benson availability cluster for that. That's fine. So click on next. So it's going to go ahead and create that cluster with those two nodes on it. So the cluster has finished creating. So you can click on finish. So here we can see the cluster here. So here we can see the cluster, and over here, if we look at the nodes that are there, we'll see that we have those are two nodes on the cluster and they all show up. Network, you can look at the network and all of that stuff. So with this done at this level, the next thing we have to do here is um, uh, we can go ahead. Oh yeah, we haven't installed SQL Server itself, so we can go ahead and install SQL Server. I had it already downloaded, so if you don't have it downloaded, you can just download that. I have the SQL Server downloaded already, so I can just double click on this executable file. So in this sense, I'm just going to do a custom install. Take on install, installing the developer edition. And I'm going to do the same on over here. I'm going to run the installation as well. Run that. It's just going to be a basic installation with basic information, not installing like things like SSRS, SSIS, and all of that. It's just going to be a basic install. But I'm going to put the DB engine. So when this pops up, you go under installation, and we're going to do a kind of a standalone, um, install a standalone. So we click on SQL, new SQL Server standalone installation. So the wizard is going to launch, and we just follow the prompt. So we're just going to do a developer. Basically, we're not going using any product key. So just go next. I'm going to accept that, and it's going to do some checks in there, and just take next. Then it's going to perform some uh, basic installation checks. Okay, so this is where you have to choose your DB engine. I can make sure I want a DB engine replication. That's fine. I don't want really much stuff in there. So I'm going to leave my root directories and all these shared file locations. I'm just going to leave it at default. Just click next. So over here, I'm not going to use a default instance. I'm going to use a named instance. So here, I'm going to put this name instance as primary. Put it as primary. Let me just put that primary server. I'm just gonna leave it like that, primary server. Gonna go next. Okay, right here I see the SQL Server Agent. Most of the time, I always want to make this. I don't want to start it up manually. Let it just be automatic. Then I enable perform volume maintenance task privilege. I give that, and then I take a next. What I'm doing here is just kind of basic um, installations. So I'm going to be using Windows authentication mode, and we're going to see the different types of authentication mode. We're going to use the SQL Server, and we're going to try to create some of that anyway. So here I already have a user, so I just click on Add User, add the current user. So it's just going to go ahead and add that current user there. But if you're using, let's say, you're using other means of authentication, you can define that. So I'll just take next. So it gives me an overview of everything that's going to run and install whatever is going to configure. So I just take install. So this installation is going to run for a while. Let's go over and launch the same thing on a dev environment. So click on install here. Click on server standalone. Mm, Okay, same thing. Same things specified over there. We do here. Okay, I'm just gonna select normal server instance. Name the instance here. I'm gonna take this as secondary server. I'm just gonna put the secondary server. You take next. I'm just gonna make this a start automatic as well. Take next. Add the user here. Take next, and everything looks okay. Take install. So this will run the installation, and make backup over here. The primary server is still running, and it's going to take a little while. And I'm just going to come back while it's finished installing. Come back. Okay, right now we could see here that the installation finished successful, and if we check on the dev side, we'll see everything also succeeded. So we can go ahead and close this. Okay, that's fine. Go ahead and close that. We might need to just install the, the SQL Server Management Studio. So let's just go ahead and run that. So we can just click on Management. It will go over to the Microsoft website, and when you come down here, you can see download SQL Server. So we're just going to go ahead to download that. I think we should just run anyway. Let's find. Let's just save it, and let's download. Let's do the same thing over here. Download that. But if you already have it, that's fine. No need. But if you're doing a fresh install like me, You just need to download that. Okay. When it's done downloading, we'll go ahead and run the install. This did has 70 very soon, a couple of seconds. And yeah, this is still coming up. Okay, this should be done very fast. Okay, so with this done, we can go ahead and run the installation. You can close this if you want. So we're just gonna do default location install. So just run that installation. And let's see over here. This one too will be done in a minute, seconds. So actually, it should be done. Okay, let's run that as well. So click on install. Let's check here. Okay, still have a couple of minutes for that, for both of them to finish. So I'm just kind of going through this gradually because I know a couple of people have issues with. There are really good documents online to get this installed, but some of them kind of miss some little pieces there. So that's why I'm just going to a video will help kind of get some of those little pieces there um, um, fixed. Okay, so I think this should we should be done here in a while. So when this is finished, the next thing we are going to do is we are going to kind of enable the TCP/IP. So I just want this to finish. I don't want to put so much load in here. It really helps when you're trying to connect another SQL Server instance that's running remotely. I've had that a couple of times where if I don't get that set up, it will kind of mess things up. So yeah, should be finished in a while here, I think. Mm, so we could see here that our SQL Server Management Studio version 18.8 has been installed. So when the installation finishes, you need to restart the server. So you can just go ahead and restart that server for the installation to finish. For the primary server, I already went ahead and restarted that. So here the server is starting up. This one, we should be fine here. Let me log in here. Kind of always pops up this. So log in. This is coming up. Should be fine soon. Okay. This one should be fine as well. So let's log in here. I'm sorry about the black screen. It's just kind of when you have to press Alt Control Delete on your keyboard. It's just kind of so annoying sometimes. But yeah. Okay. Um, everything should be fine. And let's go back here. We should be able to see our SQL Server Management Studio. Let's just ping that to the taskbar so that we don't have to go there over all times. And over here, yeah, this should be fine. And we could see our SQL Server Management Studio here. I'm just going to ping that to the to the taskbar so that I can see it over here. So we can go ahead and launch that, start it up, and same thing, launch the SQL Server Management Studio. And one of the things which I mentioned earlier we have to do is to enable TCP for TCP IP. It's very important if we have to be able to get to connect to those different servers. So let's just wait this to come up. It's taking a little while. It's first time loading, so it should load up soon. Oh, it's kind of taking a while there. I don't know why. Okay, it should be it should be up. Okay, that should be fine. Oops, looks like I started it twice. Okay, so on the production server is up. So if we look here, we could see that we're logging into the database engine and we're logging into the server. This is a server name here. So, which is a primary server. So we're using Windows Authentication. So if we just logging, since we already have that, it should log us in, and we could see that we have those default databases. These are just system databases here. And if we look over here, I had two of these open, which I need to close one of them. So we could log into this to these servers, and it logs in just fine. Okay. Now we're not here to really kind of touch more on logging, but if I want to just quickly show that, um, I'm going to show you when we're creating a login, basically. Yeah, that's fine. But note one thing here is that if I try to log into a remote server, it here, anyway, we'll see that later on. So let's move on. So the first thing we're going to do here is we need to enable TCP IP. And in order to do that, we need to open up the configuration manager. So how do you get to the configuration manager? So you just click that you can just click on search bar here and you click on configuration. So you see SQL Server 2017 configuration manager. You open that up. So there are two things we need to do here. For TCP is just um, just mostly for communication. It's a protocol. So you click here, you click on for the server, you see that TCP is disabled. So you right click on it and you enable that. It tells you that you will need to do a restart before it takes effect. That's fine. So after enabling that, that's not all. We have to right click, take properties, and then we go on IP addresses and we go right down here. Uh, we'll see TCP, but we'll come back to this later. Something I'll show you there. So again, here we need to enable failover manager, the always on high availability. So to do that, you just click on SQL Server Services. You right click here and you take properties. And here you will see always on high availability. You click on that and you will have to enable that for that cluster. So basically, remember we created the cluster already. So it picked up that cluster we created already. So we just have to enable that. And under startup services, there's something which you could put here. Oops, where's that? I thought I had it somewhere. Okay, okay, we've enabled that. So under startup services, I want you to input this T uh, hyphen T 9532 9532. Some people put this, some don't, but that's fine. You apply that. You say yes, I will restart. That's fine. So it's going to perform a restart. You see the servers, it has been restarted. But if not, you can, you can just right click there and restart. You can just right click and restart. It will restart the services, which should be fine. And we'll need to do that for both servers. I hope the other one close up. Why are we having these two here? I need a close up one. Okay. So I need to do same thing here. I go on configuration manager. Configuration manager. I will do the same thing. I'm gonna enable this guy here. Click on services. Protocol. Availability cluster. Yes. And startup. Gonna put hyphen 9. 532. Add this. Yeah. Gonna apply that. Yes. It's gonna do a restart. Yep. So we'll restart. Make sure it's running. If not, you can just manually restart it yourself. So go over here to production server. Even this guy, I will show you this when we come back. Okay, now this is something I want to make sure I want to show you here. When you have this dynamic TCP port here set to this, sometimes when you try to connect to a remote instance, it kind of gives you an issue. So what I mostly do here is remove this, and it's just gonna be zero anyway, or you can just leave it the way it is. And here you put the normal default port, which is 1423. Then you apply that, it will restart, that's fine. Yes. If you want to just restart the services, you can go ahead and do a restart of that. And over here to dev environment, it should be the same thing. It should have gone over to this value. Then over here, I can just put 1433. So I'm just using the default port. Apply yes. Okay. And just want to make sure everything looks good. So just gonna restart that service. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about logging. Um, with logging here, what we're going to do here is that when you create a logging in SQL Server, there are a couple of ways to get to create a logging. For example, let me just leave this page open. For example, right here I've logged in as I've used the Windows authentication login, all right, to log into SQL Server. But if I create a login for a user, for example, if I right click here and I say new login, and I say this login is going to be a SQL Server authentication. Now, here, if I put a login for this user and I put it as prod user, and then the password, I put a password for that user, and then the same thing here, I put a password for that user. And I can go to roles. I want to make it a sysadmin mapping. That's fine. I don't want to map it to anything right now. That's just basically. So at this point, if I click on OK, it has created a login. Now, if I expand this, I will see a login called a prod user. Now, if I want to log in as this user, look at what is going to happen. If I close the management studio and I open it back again to log in as the new user which I have created, let's see what happens. Okay, now I'm not using the Windows authentication since I've created a user under SQL Server Authentication. Now I'm going to select SQL Server Authentication. At this point, I'm going to put a prod user. And then if I put post, and if I try to connect here, there's going to be an issue. They say prod failed for prod user. This is an error. And the reason for this error is because SQL Server by default authenticates only to the uses only Windows authentication. All right. So how do we resolve that? Let's connect again and change that. Let's just connect. Let's just use our default connection here. a default authentication, and you right click over here at your instance here and you take properties. Then you go to connections. When you click on connections, I think it should be security. Yeah, security. Then you see here that authentication is just Windows authentication. So you have to select this both SQL Server and Windows authentication. That's all. You click on next. It says will take effect after it restart. So in the restart is needed. So you take OK. And so let's just go ahead and restart. Let's right click on the instance and take restart. Let's just go ahead and say yes, we want to restart it. You say yes. So it's just going to perform a restart of that instance, but it will keep us connected. All right. Okay. So it's restarted. So let me close this now and log back in again as that user. Oh, I didn't have to even close it. I might just have opened a different connection session. That should be fine. But yeah. But not this is just optional. If I'm just showing this connection thing here, it's if it's optional. If you have to, if you already have that set up with using Active Directory, you don't need to bother about this. So now let's connect in a prod user. So if you prod user now, and I put my password here, and you see here is because you see now it's trying to log in now because defaultly it specified that I need to change my password at login. So I can put in my password right now. Same password. Now I'm able to log in. See, I've logged in now as a prod user. So that's how if you want to create a user in SQL Server and you want to log in as that user, you might decide to go to that route. Okay. Okay. Now what we're going to do here is that we're not going to create we're not going to use we're not going to use this user for our replication. So for our replication, I will create an Windows authentication user. Note that for Windows authentication, the user needs to be a user that is in the operating system. Right? It's not like the SQL Server authentication which we just created now. This one is Windows authentication. So at the Windows level, at operating system level, we need to have that user. So how do we create that? So the first part we're done with that, creating the SQL Server authentication. Now for the Windows Server side, so what do we do? How do we do that? So we need to go to control panel. I just want to open up this and then I come to create user. And I'm just going to call it, uh, I'm just going to call it, uh, I'm just going to give it Yerima, right? Call it Yerima. And the password, I'm going to put a password here. And same thing, I'm going to put that same password here. And it's just a hint, right? That's just it. Finish. So I've created a new user here. And so after creating that user, now we're going to create a login for that user. Okay. So you can click on security, you click on login. In this case, now we need to select Windows authentication because we created a user there. You can just search here and over here you type Yerima, and when you do a search now, it will pick it up. All right. Then we take OK. So we see you've created that user there. That's fine. And we can go ahead and map it as sysadmin and other roles. Uh, let's say we just created some, let's create a database here, example. Um, I'm just, that's fine. Let's finish with the user. I don't want to go through, let's just, because I wanted to map that user to a database, but that's fine. Okay, I think everything should look fine here, and then you take OK. So here now we have a new login, right? Which is here right here. Okay, and we will need to do this also for this other box here. So I'm just going to go ahead. Oops. Oh, what's wrong with this box? It's kind of froze out on us. I don't know why. Okay. So control panel. Just going to create the user Yerima there. I don't know why this dev server here is kind of slow. So this user we're creating is the user we will use uh, for to perform our replication, basically. So let's go ahead and add. I don't know why the server is really, really slow. So here, mm, just gonna take next, click finish. User is added. So I'll come over here. And I'll go to logins, new login. So and this is how when you create the operating system user, you can add that user over to your instance. It's, and now that operating system user can be able to log in there. Oh, we'll say okay. I'm gonna make it a sysadmin user, so everything should be fine at this level. I'll take okay. So I've created our login. So that is the login we will be using for that. And for some reason, I just like to create the other login which we had already, so that I will prod user. I might use it at some point, just but we're not going to use it though. So okay, and gross. Oh my God, this server is really slow. I don't know why. It's really slow. Okay, that's fine. And we'll make sure that we can connect the same thing we did earlier on. So, so we might need to restart this server, which is fine. Let's restart it. Okay, let's jump over to our prod server. So everything is looking okay now. We've created uh, the logging, which is fine. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to create sample databases, which we will use to make sure our application is working. So here I'm just going to create a sample database, and I'm going to call that database production. Okay. And I'm going to call the database production. I'll leave everything at default. Oh, sorry. I wasn't supposed to get this. So I'll take OK. It's just a production database. That's fine. And I'm just going to add one more. I'm just going to add one more database here. And I'm going to call it def. That's fine. And now, when you're doing SQL Server, when you're configuring always on, you need to always make sure you take a backup of these servers. So you need to have a backup, and uh, your recovery model should be at least full. So you need to make sure you take a backup of this server. So what we're going to do now is take a backup. And taking a backup, it's kind of always good. Some people, what they do is they kind of use a shared drive and put everything on a shared drive so that, let's say, the standby server can actually access those backups from there as well. There are a couple of ways you can create a shared drive. Let's take, for example, in this instance here, I just want to quickly show something here. In order to create a shared drive here, what you can do is, let's say, for example, we want to map this entire drive. For some reason, I don't know why, this, these servers are really slow. So if you want to create share this entire drive, what you can do is you can right click on network, take on map drive. So we take on map drive, and here you can give what drive name. Let's just take it to be E, and you follow this same formula here, and you need to put the the IP address of the server. It can be the IP address of the server. So the IP address of this server is what? It should be. It should end with. So this is 150, 19150. Okay. So you can put the IP address of this server here, which is 192.168.91.150. And then if we want to map the entire C drive, what we can do is we can put a capital C here and we put a dollar sign. So this will map the entire drive. So we click finish, it maps the entire drive. So that drive has been mapped. So if we click here, we'll see that this now is a network drive. We've mapped this drive to a network drive. So if we want to mount this drive over to the standby server, so if we come over to the standby server here, and we want to map that same drive over there here, we can go ahead and map a network drive, and we can specify where that drive is. So the drive is running on a different server, that's on a separate server on its own. So we specify the IP address of that server, dot 150, that is where the drive is. Okay, and then we map it here. Now you see, now what has happened here is that this drive does not belong to this server. It's actually on the other server, right? So for example, if we open up this drive, and whatever we do here on this drive actually goes on the other drive. So because it's now a network drive, right? Accessed by different computers. So if we decide to say backup and backups, I just create a file where we're going to take our backups to. And if I open these backups, for example, I just want to do something here, and then I create this to be def. Let's say I want to put my def backups there. This is just an illustration. And over here, I want to put my prod. So you see, I've created here a couple of folders inside this drive. So inside this directory, if I hop across to the other server, and if I open this drive, I will see the same thing, because this is now a network drive. So this is how you can map. You can do mapping, all right? So we're just going to first of all take a backup and put it on this shared drive here that we will have now, all right? So that the other instance can still use it. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a backup of the production server. We right click on production, we take task, and then we take backup. Okay, we see that our recovery model here is set to full. In this case now, we don't want to send it to this location, so we can go ahead and remove this and we'll add our own location we have. So click here. Then we will choose our location, which is backups. And then since we're doing prod, we're going to put it in prod. Right? You can put the backup name if you want. I'm just going to put prod. This is just for demonstration purpose, okay? Then I'll just take OK. And this is our new backup location, which is a shared drive. And then I take OK. So my backup is in progress. So backup is completed successful. And if I back up also the def also, I'll do the same thing. So I remove this guy here and then take add and I will choose backups and then say I want to put in depths and then I can say dev, that's fine. Then I say okay. So my backup has been taken successfully. Now, if you look here, if we go to our shared drive here, we should be able to see that we have those backups there, right? And so it's there. So even if we hop across to the other server here and we open that up, we should be able to see that we have everything there. So everything is there, it's fine. So we've taken a backup of that server already, which is fine. So the next thing which we are going to do is that um, we're going to launch the availability wizard um, to add availability groups. All right, because right now we don't have any availability group. So how do we do that? We will, and there's one more thing I want us to do is that the user which we created earlier on, we need to add that user. So we can come over here to configuration manager and where was that account? Okay, here where we have account, we want to use that same user because you have to make sure the same user is on the same locations, both remotely and here. So we can browse here and remember the user's name was Yerima. And then if we do a search, comes up, we take OK. So we want to use this same user here. And then we put the password which we had earlier. And we put the password which we had earlier. We take apply. We'll require restart. That's fine, no problem. So it's very important that you have the same user on both servers. If it's not the same user on both servers, it can kind of give you some issues there. So I think everything must have been, just to double check, I can just restart the service again. And over here, we need to do the same thing. We need to go to our configuration manager and properties, and we need to add that same user that we created earlier. So add that user, same, we put the password, and over here, put the password, and there we go. Okay. So it will restart the service and everything. And we hope over here everything should be looking okay now. So now that we have that fine, what we can do now is that we can create availability group. Now, if you come over here to availability group, if I expand this availability group, now we have this. So we can right click and launch the availability group wizard. So that way availability group wizard opens. So let's make sure over here it's fine. Okay. So over there looks good. Let me just restart this. This. Okay, let's go ahead and create availability group. So we come over here, the wizard opens, we take next. And we'll need to give an availability group name. We can say availability group. Uh, I want to just call it availability group replication. Okay. Then this is going to be SQL Server cluster. We take next. We just leave everything that way. And then here it shows us the different databases that meet the requirement to be in an availability group. Because when you create an availability group, you need to add databases in that availability group. So if they didn't meet this requirement, this prerequisite, shows that it shows that they've met this prerequisite. So they have their backups and everything is fine. So it goes into the instance and looks for the databases that meet that prerequisite. So these are the two backups. So in this first case, we're just going to add the production server to the availability group. We'll leave that other one. We'll do that later. We just leave that one for now. We just take next. And then here, what we see here is that we need to add a replica, which basically is our standby server. So you click on add replica. And now we have add replica here. We need to connect to our standby replica, which is the our replica is the standby server, right? So which is actually SQL Server. I think it was SQL Server develop, right? And if we decide to use Windows authentication, now let's just go ahead and use this the produce that we used earlier. That's fine. Uh, and let's try to connect. If we connect to the standby, not that we're trying to connect to the standby. Okay, access for the password. Okay. Okay. So this is our standby server now. So we are able to remotely connect to the standby server. All right. So it shows here the role. This is the primary and the standby, this secondary. All right. We're just going to leave all of them at asynchronous. That's fine. Then you click on endpoint. So when you do that, it creates this endpoint for that servers, which is fine. We'll leave it at that. Backup preference, we're just going to leave the backup preference the way it is. Listener, this is where we need to create an availability group listener, especially when you're doing high availability and you need to make sure that it's, um, um, you have to do failover and failback. You don't want to depend on those server IPs. So we're going to put it AG uh, listener. I'm just going to give the name of that listener and the port. So this listener is going to be, I'm just going to use the same SQL Server port, which is port 33. It's going to be static. I'm going to make it static. Now I need to add the IP. So you click on add here. This is a subnet, which is fine. That's a subnet. So let's look for an IP address which is not being used. 168.91. Let's put it at 157. We just use 157. This is not used, right? So click on add. So you see that added there. And read only, everything is every other thing is looking fine. And we click next. Just go next. Endpoint list. Let's just accept that and continue. So in this case now, most of the times, if you have a particular shared mount point, you can decide to click this option and provide a mount point, share mount point, but we're just going to leave it at automatic seeding, right? Then we click on next. So it's going to perform a couple of checks. If some of the things you did were not correct, this is where you start having issues and it will fail here and you will need to go back and make sure everything is working fine. So here we click on next again. They shows you everything that you've done, all your configuration and everything is looking okay, fine. Then you take finish. So it will start the configuration of endpoint, and this is where it will create everything, and it will create databases on the standby, the production. Remember, we created those databases on the master server. We didn't create them on the standby, but it is going to create those availability group, those databases, and then it will create them on the standby. So everything is looking pretty good here. So it's finished. It has deployed everything. So you click on close. Okay, so right now, if we expand this availability group option here, we're going to see that it created an availability group as a primary, the primary availability group, because it also created a secondary at the secondary side. So if we expand this, we're going to see that we can look at the availability group replicas, the availability group databases, and the availability group listeners. So for the replicas, we expect to see two in there, which is the secondary and the primary. So we see here, these are primary server, which has been deployed here. And the database, we should see only one database because we added only one database in the availability group. And our listener which we created. So everything is really looking fine. You can also look at the state of this replication here. Anyway, but first, let's go over to the standby server. So if we hop over to the standby server here, and we just refresh this, and we go to availability group, we will see that it came over to the standby server and did the same thing. So we have availability group for the standby server. And the same thing here, everything is looking as it's supposed to be here, production and all of that. So everything is looking fine. Okay, so right now everything is looking fine as we expected. So instead of going over there and connecting back and forth, we can actually connect the standby server here. So let's go and add the standby. Just connect the standby server here. So we're connecting SQL Develop, which is our standby server, and we're just going to connect there as that user. So if we connect, should be able to connect. Yeah, we're fine. So the top part is the primary side, and the below part is the secondary side. So this is our secondary side, even though it's remotely, but we can connect from it from here. All right. So we could see that this is the secondary, and we could see everything looking fine. Okay, right now we can also look at a couple of things here. The availability group here. We can right click on this availability group, and we can look at show dashboard. So if we look at dashboard, we're able to see the state of these replicas. All right. So here we can be able to see um, available hosted by that manual and all of that. You can see here. Yeah. So everything is looking okay, synchronizing. You could see that. And yeah, let's close this guy here, and let's look at show dashboard from here. So want us to see, because we're looking at the secondary, I just want us to see the dashboard for the entire availability group. The server is kind of a little bit slow, so um, it's taking a while. And load those metrics up. So after this, what we will do here is we will basically everything should be looking fine. So what we'll do here is we'll try to kind of create a simple table on the master server and see if it's being replicated on the standby, right? Just to make sure that our replication is working as expected. Servers are kind of slow. We might have gone through quite a whole lot of stuff, but it's kind of really slow. So that's fine. I'm kind of wondering if I should connect to this to the primary also from here, so that if that one is slow, I can work with it from here. Let me see. Let me see. Sql Server Production. Let me try to see if I can connect. Let me connect to that. So I'm connected to the primary. This is a primary here. This is a primary here. Over there was kind of slow. I don't know. Let's work from over here. So over here, if I expand this, I will see my production database. You see here it says synchronize. All right. So let's just go ahead and create a simple table here, and see if that table. So if we expand production, we'll look at the tables. There are basically no tables here right now. All right. So let's open up a query tool. So we have a query tool here. Let's just look. I'm sure we should have maybe a create table SQL Server. I just want to see if we could see some tables and maybe data to load online. I don't know. Let's just see. You can see some huge tables online which we can use now. Uh, okay, let's just create this table. Okay, and here let's paste that command here, and let's run that query. So you see it has been created. All right. So if we refresh that, we should be able to see a new table. So this is our new table here, which we've created, if your persons. Now, let's make sure that this table is in the secondary. This is our secondary server right here. You see, this is secondary server. So if we expand it, expand databases, this is a production. It says synchronizing, it's pulling it up. So if we expand that, okay, this is something I wanted to show you guys. Here, what you're seeing here is that you cannot, by default, the SQL Server, you can't connect to, by default, you cannot connect to, it doesn't accept connections to connect to the replica. So we need to make sure we allow connections for that replica. So in order to do that, what we can do here is we can right click on the availability group for this, um, the secondary availability group, and take properties. And you see here it says readable, it says no. Right? It's readable here, it says readable secondary, it says no. Right? But we need to, let me see. Okay, connect to the primary. Okay, let me expand the primary and replicas and go on the secondary, right click. So you can only do that from the primary, right? So I need to change this to yes and then take apply. All right. So now I can execute queries on, I can be able to access the secondary. So let's come over here and let's just refresh this. And we expand our databases and production. Now we can access that, right? And we could see that our table is there. So whatever we do here, it's replicating immediately to the standby immediately. So yeah, this is it's kind of slow here, but that's so even if we decide to create another table and we call it persons 12, right? And we run that query, it's created. So over here, if we look at the database, now we have two tables. This is on the primary server. The primary, we have two tables now. And we go over to the secondary part, server part of it, and we just refresh that. We should be able to see that table there, right? So we see our table there. So everything is working fine as expected. What I wanted to for us to see earlier was um, look at availability group show dashboard. It was kind of taking slow to load over there on the on the primary. So it shows here replication failover is manual. Failover here. Let's if we open this up. Okay, good. So this is the view I wanted us to see from over there, but it's kind of taking slow. So it kind of shows us the health of our replication, which is working fine. And you see here that the secondary is synchronizing, right? So it's synchronizing means it's trying to catch up with some stuff. The server is kind of really slow. I don't know why, but we are able to get that achieved. So we see here no data loss, nothing, and you see everything is looking perfectly fine. So that is how to set up failover always on availability group. And we could see that our application, everything is working fine as expected. So if you have any comments, let me know. Thank you. Okay, guys. So something I just want to share here quickly is I just log in here. This is our production server again, which we already configured earlier, and below it, this is a secondary server, which we already configured. Everything is looking fine. So what I wanted to show here is how we can add a particular database. Remember, we created two databases. So I want to see how we can add a particular database to that replication. So the way you can do that is you can right click on the primary group here. You say add database, and a wizard is going to open, and you take next. And as usual, already what we saw was that it will look at the database that meet the requirements to be added in an availability group. And in this case here, we see that dev meets that requirement prerequisite. So what we can do here is you just say, yes, I want dev, and then you take next. And you can see here that in order to do that, you need to connect to the secondary server, secondary instance. So we can hit on connect. And here, what we can do is that we will use a normal SQL Server authentication, and we will specify our password, and we hit enter. So right now we're connected to our standby database. So now we can take next. So we just choose the same automatic seeding. We take next. So everything is looking fine here, and then we take next. And it tells us every database that will be added there and the availability group. Take finish. So we see here that it has gone through and it's a success. So, wow, so it's done. So if we hop over down here to our secondary server here and we look at the availability, we look over here at databases. On the secondary side here, we see that it's synchronizing. It's already automatically added here by default, right? So as we saw earlier, we can look at the dashboard and we can see everything is looking fine here. Um, yeah, it's a secondary. So it's synchronizing. We just added something, so it's synchronizing. So that's one of the things I wanted to show guys how we can synchronize that.